This is the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Welcome back. I'm your host, Jackson Neill, here on Wednesday, June 19th, 2019. Today, I'm going to be talking with Joe Keegan of the Premier Lacrosse League about the league's first 3 weeks and previewing next week's matchups. Then, I'm going to hop over and do some NBA talk, talking about the New York Knicks and what they should do this offseason. But first, I just want to remind everyone that this podcast is available on all of your favorite platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and SoundCloud. It is also available on JacksonNeillPodcasts.com, the home for all of the podcasts I publish. So, jumping into my conversation with Joe about the first couple weeks of the Premier Lacrosse League. If you're not familiar, the PLL, as it's called, is a new professional lacrosse league that features some of the best players in the world. It has 6 teams, and it's on a tour-based model. You can watch the games on NBC, NBC Sports Network, and NBC Sports Gold. It's been really, really fun to watch. I'm a huge lacrosse fan, but even if you're not a big fan of the sport, it's pretty good at drawing you in and helping you understand the game for a first-time viewer. So, I talked with Joe about the first 3 weeks of the season, what he's seeing with these teams, and previewing this week's matchups. I guess just a little background on the way the league works and this tour model. Like, how does that? Can you just explain to me a little bit, and the listeners out there explain how exactly this tour model is working?
Yeah. So the idea is that with a 6-team league, if you're not a tour-based league, all you're going to hit is 6 cities in a season. So with PLL, the tour-based model enables the league to hit more cities over the course of the season and to kind of drop all of those players into the same city and really make it more about the weekend experience than about each game. So a lot of fans are going to 2, maybe all 3 games when PLL comes to their city, and they're really getting to experience not just the players who are on the field that day, but out in like the PLL zone, the Premier zone, they're seeing the players who are off that day, but they're in town for their game, whether that's a Sunday game and they're in the Premier zone on Saturday or vice versa.
So right now we were through 3 weeks. We got some games going along, but what teams have really stood out so far? What teams are looking, in your mind, looking like some of the best in this league?
Yeah, I think you got to start with the Snakes, 3-0. Not all of those games were so decisive, but really like a 2-goal game in this league is considered a blowout. It's taken overtime more often than not for the Whip Snakes, but they're just really well coached. I think Coach Stagnita just has this team down like in all phases of the game, whether that's early offense or the substitution game or getting into their 6-on-6 sets. They're really crisp. They do all the little things really well. Clearing, riding, man up, man down. They have a lot of really coachable players. Everybody always raves about how good Maryland Terrapins are in the locker room, and the Whip Snakes have a bunch of them. So when you have coachable players and a great coach, you're going to have a team that's hot right on. They wasted no time gelling and getting to know one another, which I think we've seen a couple other teams sort of trying to find their go-to dodge or their favorite actions, their favorite, pick and roll combinations, what they'd like to do in crunch time, where the Whip Snakes are a team that know what they want to do. That's a big reason why they're 3-0.
Yeah, they've certainly really, really stood out. And you mentioned there the Maryland connection. They have so many Maryland players, and you see it throughout the league. How do you think it is affecting play, having teams with a lot of players from one single school on there? I think it was the Redwoods that have all those players from Notre Dame or Atlas with the Johns Hopkins connection. How do you think that kind of affects play? How do you think it's helping these players maybe gel quicker?
Yeah, I think it's helping them in the sense that they already know each other's tendencies, especially on the defensive side. We really don't think about defensive chemistry so much because there are really only a couple different ways to play defense. We're not going to see too much zone at the professional level because those offenses would just carve you up. So really it's just a matter of those nuances, like which matchups do you want to slide earlier to, which matchups do you want to hold your slides against. knowing when your teammate's in trouble, knowing where to push shooters for your goalie. And a lot of these guys have played in front of Kyle Bernlohr. You get, an ex-cover man like Matt Dunn behind the cage, probably the best at that position. And then Michael Earhart's probably the best up top. Those two guys can take out your best attackman and best midfielder just completely. They can wipe them out of the box score. So you get guys like that as the spine of your defense. That really helps a lot. But at the end of the day, every team has talented players like that. And to be able to combine, like you said, that Redwoods defense, so many Brown guys and Notre Dame guys gelling together, learning each other's tendencies and playing that Notre Dame quick help style of defense. We see a lot of aggressive V holds, a lot of slides to the back of Dodgers, just really creeping up on people with double teams. Something that we don't always see at the professional level. A lot of times people leave those matchups on an island because these Dodgers are so good at passing. If you slide to their eyes, they're going to get out of that double team early. But these Notre Dame defenders are really good at knowing when to help their teammates and when to squeeze those double teams. And I think these defenses are being a little more aggressive than we've traditionally seen at the pro level.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think right there you start to talk about something, how they're playing defense against these dodging players. And coming into this league, there was a lot of these, I guess we would say, these physical dodging midfielders. I'm thinking, obviously Paul Rabel. I'm thinking Miles Jones, Kyle Harrison, Sergio Perkovic. These players that we really looked at and pinpointed coming into the season, but yet now a couple games in, we're not seeing them put up the gaudy numbers in the box score. Do you think it's the defense they're playing on Dodgers that maybe have limited, so I guess, some of these big dodging midfielders in terms of putting up stats, or maybe we would have expected them to see more?
I think it's maybe the shortened field and the shot clock where so much of the scoring is happening before those guys even get on the field. It's not so much, another guy you can throw in that category is Miles Jones. His team's been rolling, but he hasn't exactly been scoring. He's been getting plenty of hockey assists, but he's not the guy scoring on this team. But that's because Connor Fields and Josh Byrne and Miles Fenton are so good on the fast breaks. When you have pulls like Matt Reese, who can push and drop two bombs, a guy like Jake Ficaro, who's been stuck on defense a bunch of times, almost to the point where you think it's by design. He's been fine on the defensive end, and then when they get a stop with him on the field, it's turned into a transition too a couple times. So you get guys like that. These shorter fields are leading to, I think we've seen more flat fast breaks rather than that traditional L fast break, which is leading to a lot of pass down, pick downs, which are changing the matchups. So you get a guy like Josh Byrne out on that wing, and now you change the matchup. If I can get a short stick on Josh Byrne, and then a long pull on my defensive midi, I'm probably going to leave that defensive midi on the field and play out this possession, try to work that mismatch. I'm not going to be in a huge rush to sub the defensive midi off for that midi. So I think the shorter clock, shorter field, we're almost seeing those strictly offensive guys phased up just a little bit. They're still getting their possessions, but not as many. So that's why their points are dropping. But I would say the points are dropping proportionally with the possessions that they're playing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and because that was one thing I was definitely noticing of these big names, and as you're mentioning now with the shorter field and the shorter shot clock, do you think that maybe we're gonna start to see a transition on the pro game to maybe more two-way play at the midfield position? Because like you're saying, they're getting out on fast breaks so quick, and you're seeing a lot of goals scored like that, where it really would help to have midfielders who operate more in a shift minds. Like there's line one, line two. Think like hockey, where there's shifts rather than just being an offensive specific midfielder.
Yeah, I think we might. I think it depends on the team. I think one team that's really good playing that way is the Redwoods. Guys like Pat Harbison, Sergio Salcido, Brent Adams, Jack Neer. They're really good two-way players, and that's a reason why you see a guy like Kyle Harrison in that category that you talked about, offensive midfielders who aren't putting up the points that they're used to. Because the Redwoods two-way midfielders are doing so well in transition, staying and playing and causing those mismatches against teams that might have more specialized units. So I think it depends on your personnel. I'm just not sure how many players there are like that on the planet. Like, there are guys like Jake Bernhardt, Joel Tinney, who are great two-way guys. But I think at the end of the day, if you have a guy like Chris Kluche running out of the box as a midi, you're going to want to get him on the field on offense. And then on the same side, like, if you have Dominique Alexander as a defensive midfielder, you'd rather have him out there than have your offensive player. As long as you're able to get those subs and as long as other teams are subbing, I think it's a thing where it's like a copycat league. Like, you see a couple teams go to that style, almost like where the Golden State Warriors played a center off the floor, and now no team can play a center against them because they were so good at playing without a center, because Draymond could cover centers and centers couldn't cover him. I think if the Redwoods are able to impact the game like that with their two-way play, then we'll see more teams react to it. But that might be further down the line.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I like that Golden State Warriors analogy in that situation. It is really interesting to see these different almost chess moves by each team, throughout these just first 3 games of the season. One storyline that's really emerging throughout this PLL season, just 3 weeks into it, is how well the box lacrosse players are performing in this league. And that, with the shortened field, we talked about the big midfielders, but is these attackmen who maybe have a box background that are really, really performing well and scoring a lot of points. Why do you think the box lacrosse players are performing at such a high level in the PLL right now?
I think it's the way they attack. Their sticks are always to the middle, and they're always working to improve their angles. They're not afraid to get physical when they dodge. They would rather get physical to improve that angle, attack inside the hash mark, so to speak, than make their move, create separation down the alley for a worse shot. So anytime your stick is to the inside of the field, your shooting percentage is going to increase. And those box guys are so good at getting shots off with their sticks to the inside, whereas a field player might have their stick to the outside in order to protect it from their defender, but that's going to decrease their angle and their shooting percentage.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think another thing that kind of also affects that is that 2-point arc, that 15-yard 2-point arc, where yes, you're seeing more 2-point shots and goals, but maybe it kind of condenses the field a little bit. Maybe it forces the attack players. Maybe the game kind of gets them a little more closer to the goal, and of course that would benefit the players playing in close encounter situations.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of those box guys too are those attackmen who are on the field and they're making plays in space where I think we've seen some of the best chances come on those fast breaks.
So through 3 weeks, there's a couple players in my mind, that have stood out. I think of like Tom Schreiber, Justin Gutterton, Connor Fields. In your mind, through 3 weeks, if you had to pick a league MVP right now, who is the person you would pick, or maybe the top 3?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's cliche to go with like best player on the best team. For the Whip Snakes, I'm not even sure if you would go with an offensive guy because I think their defense has been so good, but then it gets tricky where nobody ever wants to give the MVP to a defensive player. I think a guy like Earhart or Dunn could definitely deserve it. But in terms of offensively, I think Tom Schreiber, like you said, he's still the best player on the planet. He's so unselfish, and that offense really just kind of goes as he goes. He slips into so many different roles, depending on who's running with him. This week, they dressed Ian McKay. They've had a bunch of righty midfielders running with Schreiber, so Schreiber's been playing that lefty side a little bit. But his ability just to draw slides, find the open guy, throw in no-look passes to these guys like Marcus Holman, Will Manny. They have such good finishers on this Archers team, and they're really unselfish in space. But when they get 6-on-6, they really look to Tom Schreiber to draw those slides, draw double teams, and open up those guys like Holman, like Manny, who can dodge, but they're not necessarily known as dodgers. They're more guys who feed off of those passes from Schreiber.
Mm-hmm. And you're definitely right on that one. I've loved watching Schreiber so far. Dodge, run it basically almost the length, right across the field, shoot on the run or create in space. He's been a really fun player. I think that's my personal MVP pick, Tom Schreiber, for what he's doing on the offensive end for the Archers. Looking forward to next week, week 4. I kind of want to go through some of the games and, go through the 3 games and kind of see what you're seeing in terms of previewing these matchups. And I guess starting with Redwoods going up against Chrome, looking at that matchup, the Chrome are a team that's 0-3, but they have a -3 goal differential, which is insane to think that they've lost 3 close games and, are 0-3. It's just such a close league. What are you looking in that Redwoods-Chrome matchup?
Yeah, I think for the Chrome to get on track, they just got to get the ball to Jordan Wolf earlier in the shot clock. I thought that first game he really didn't get enough touches. He was running a lot of pick and rolls at X, and the Archers were switching them, and that was putting him on a shorty, which, by the Archers, that's kind of like a defensive strategy that stretches out the game. It's just kind of taking up clock, not allowing Wolf to really get to the cage, you're giving him a mismatch in theory, but the Chrome offense has to pull the ball out and let Wolf isolate in order to attack that mismatch. So with a 52-second shot clock, switching picks like that can really be an advantage for the defense. But getting Wolf the ball, whether it's in pick and rolls or whether it's isolation, kind of letting him do what Schreiber does. I think what you mentioned with Schreiber, he's so smart at knowing when to push in that sub game, like when they're 4-on-6 or 5-on-6, he can dodge, but he'll never make that mistake. I think as the Chrome switch personnel and get their offensive midfielders on the field, they should let Wolf kind of probe a little bit and let him be a playmaker because he's just too good of a player. He's right there with Schreiber. He's the best dodging attackman in the league. They need to get him the ball a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because Chrome is a team I'm looking at with all that talent, and looking at a player like Jordan Wolf. Gutterding is certainly putting up some points early on, but I definitely agree with you that Wolf, certainly there's more to add from his point of view. Going on to another game, Atlas versus Whipsnakes. Whipsnakes top of the league right now. Atlas, a team that got their first win, but still, at 1-2, definitely has some room to improve. What are you looking for in that matchup?
Yeah, I'm curious to see where the matchups are for the Whipsnakes, who they put Dunn and Earhart on. The Atlas is a team that kind of mixes up their offensive personnel. They're really rolling 4 attackmen more than most teams, which might be tough for some guys to find a flow, especially in a game that has so many fast break opportunities. Guys like Ryan Brown, Cloutier, Eric Law, Kieran McCardle, all 4 of them are so good, but I think they really need one of them to run out of the box, which is tough because, like we talked about, those offensive midfielders aren't exactly getting on. So I think we'll see Earhart on Connor Busick, who had a great game last week, but I'm curious to see where that Matt Dunn matchup goes and who the Atlas decide to initiate with.
Mm-hmm. And it was also nice to start to see the Atlas this past week, I feel like, get their offense going to a level that hasn't seemed yet. And the play of Cloutier in this game last week, that was pretty incredible to see him putting up all those goals.
Yeah, Cloutier is a problem. He's just so big and physical. People think of him as a finisher, but I think he's really good. Maybe not as like that primary dodger, but when he picks and then rolls off that and catches with like a little approach that he can, put a defender on his back, he's a really good secondary dodger. So I think one of the best looks they do to get Cloutier in those situations is put him in a pick and roll with Joe Tinney. So doing that as much as possible. They're almost like a thunder lightning combo. Tinney's just so fast. Cloutier is so physical. You're going to have 2 very different defenders on those guys. So generally, whether it's short stick, or pull, or big, little, you're not going to want to switch those pick and rolls because you might have a slower, beefier, more physical guy on Cloutier, and on Tinney, you're going to have your quicker guy, probably smaller. You aren't going to want that quicker defender on Cloutier, and you aren't going to want the slower defender on Tinney. So those pick and rolls are really tough for a defense to cover.
Now moving on to the final game of the weekend, I think the game that I'm really looking forward to, the one that I'm circling, Chaos versus Archers, two offenses that I've loved watching. Who do you think is going to score? I mean, I don't even know who's going to score more in this one.
Yeah, there's going to be a ton of points in this one. The Archers are going to have to be better in transition defense. It's something that they haven't been great in, and they'll be one of the first to admit it. They've been dressing a bunch of attackmen, and those guys are either going to the box before getting in the hole. They're just looking to sub too early in possessions, which the Chaos are going to be in those situations. The Chaos might be the best transition team in the league. So the Archers are really going to have to play defense from the inside out, get to the hole, and then try to sub as the Chaos subs. If they can do that, they can definitely hang in this game. Their defense is so good at making adjustments. I think seeing Coach Resch on the sidelines, as Ryan Boyle pointed out on the broadcast, is just huge for a defense. I thought they really tightened up against the Whip Snakes down the stretch. Obviously didn't get enough, but they pushed that game to overtime with a really good Whip Snakes team. I think if you're looking at the top three teams in the league, it's got to be Archers, Whip Snakes, Chaos in some order. And yeah, this one, I think it's just going to come down to limiting transition chances for the Archers to win this one.
Well, it's certainly going to be a really, really good weekend. Speaking of the, ranking teams, when are those power rankings going to come out? I know there's the standings, but Joe, I need some power rankings from you.
Power ranking season's over. It's Mount Rushmore season now.
Gotcha. Well,
yeah, power ranking season. Yeah, that'll resume after Labor Day. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a big power rankings or predictions guy because I'm just always going to be wrong. I mean, there's so many variables that go into it. There's always two talented teams on the field in this league, so really more looking at some of the other storylines that are going on and just what teams are doing best. And again, like I said, it's really just going to be about who gets hot at the right time. So even these teams I've dropped a couple games early on here are fully capable. I mean, they got the guys in the locker room to get the job done. Once they start gelling, like this Atlas team is going to be pretty dangerous. Same with the Chrome. They're -3 goal differential. They're just a few goals away from being 3-0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, Joe, thank you so much for doing this interview. Where can people check your stuff out at?
Yeah, so you can check out my writing at PremierLacrosseLeague.com. Every Monday we'll be posting the 10-man ride, which is just a look at 10 things that happened over the weekend that caught my eye. And then every week later in the week, we're looking to go deeper on a topic. This week, we're going to have a pretty fun look at those Miles Jones, Jake Ficarro pick and rolls. Those two guys have ridiculous chemistry. They've played together for a few years now. They're both big-time shooters. So having those guys play the pick and roll at the top of the arc really puts the defense in a tough spot.
Well, sounds good. Thank you so much for doing this interview, Joe. And I definitely would love to have you on again during this season. It was really fun talking with you.
Yeah, you too, Jackson. Appreciate you having me on.
Again, a big thank you to Joe for coming on to the podcast. Remember, check his stuff out at PremierLacrosseLeague.com as well as on Twitter at Joe Keegs. Links to his stuff and his Twitter down in the show notes. Definitely recommend you guys go check his stuff out. A really, really fun read if you're into lacrosse. And if you're not a lacrosse fan, I highly, highly recommend the PLL. It's a really, really fun league to watch. You can check it out this weekend. It's going to be on national TV, NBC Sports Network, on Sunday, 3:30, Archers versus Chaos, the game that I'm really looking forward to this weekend. That's going to be this Sunday, 3:30 Eastern Time on NBC Sports Network. A really fun league to check out. And I'll definitely try to have Joe on throughout this season. So I now want to transition over to the NBA, where the New York Knicks are going to have a huge offseason this year. An offseason that I think will really shape the way this franchise turns out for the next several seasons, and one that I think has a lot of potential to go right, but with the New York Knicks, knowing that they are the Knicks, a lot of potential to go wrong as well. So I just want to start off by talking about the NBA draft, which is this Thursday night, where the New York Knicks hold the number 3 overall pick. And possibly by the time you guys listen to this podcast, the draft might already be over, but it's kind of a consensus. It looks like they'll be taking RJ Barrett, especially after they just declined. The news came out today. They just declined an offer from the Atlanta Hawks that would have given the Hawks the number 3 overall pick and given the Knicks 8 and 10, which was a smart move. I mean, it was kind of a dumb trade when I saw it come through, but you never know with the Knicks about just how dumb of a move they might make. This draft is a top 3 loaded draft. It is 1 through 3 is as solid as we've seen in a while. Zion Williamson, I've done several podcasts on him, including this past one on Monday. So if you want to hear more about what I think the Pelicans should do, go check out that episode that I released on Monday. But it's a top 3 star-studded draft. Zion's a clear 1, Morant's a clear 2, and Barrett is a clear number 3. Past that, it gets a little more iffy. Do you like Jarrett Culver more as DeAndre Hunter, or maybe Darius Garland? I think it gets a little more iffy. I think that 4th overall pick with the Pelicans is really where the draft's going to start to get interesting in terms of picks, trades, things like that. But smart move by the Knicks to stay into the top 3, because that's what they need. They need that. They need another great player, a great young player to kind of pair with Dennis Smith Jr. And I think RJ Barrett really will do that. I think they'll pair nicely together. Smith is a point guard that I think has a lot of potential. I really like his outlook. And RJ Barrett is a player who I think can really get to the basket well. Just has a great game. Could go to his other hand a little bit more. Gets stuck on that lefty a little bit too much, but still a player with tons of upside. But I think the big questions for the Knicks comes after the draft. Comes once the draft is over. What do the Knicks do? Because throughout the season, it basically looked like that the dream plan was for the Knicks to go for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, pair them together, get the 3rd overall pick RJ Barrett, have Dennis Smith Jr., and just kind of go from there and see what happens. And while this KD injury certainly looks like it could throw kind of a wrench into those plans, I don't think it really does. And in a way, I don't think the Knicks should think this is the end of the world in terms of KD, because Kevin Durant is a player who, with his outside jump shot, with his outside game, just the way he can shoot the ball, he should be fine after an Achilles. I know he's getting up there in age. I know not many, if any, player in NBA history really has recovered from an Achilles tear and been quite the same. But if a player were to do that, I think it's Kevin Durant. I don't think, he's going to lose some of a step. He's not going to be as quick. Maybe in the defensive end, he's going to be become a little bit more of a liability, things like that because of this Achilles. But his offensive game, where it's predicated on him being just 7 feet tall with long arms and being able to make any shot on the floor, I don't see that changing. I don't see how an Achilles tear is going to hurt and damage that game. So I think for the Knicks, you look at the cap space they have. I mean, I'm looking at a practical cap right now of around $67.7 million. That can kind of go up and down in a couple ways depending on the moves they make. But that's enough plausibly for maybe 2 max guys, but definitely at least 1. I think if you're the Knicks, you offer KD that max contract. You offer him as much money as possible. I don't care that he's going to miss a year. I think for the New York Knicks, they've put so much into this offseason. Look at that Kristaps Porzingis trade. They've been clearing cap space for this offseason. 2019 free agent class, that's the class they're going after. I think for them, Kevin Durant is a sure-sign bet. You got to go after him. However, the move to get Kyrie Irving, I don't think it's a good fit. Honestly, I don't think there's very few teams that I think Kyrie Irving is a good fit on. And I definitely don't think it'll be the New York Knicks, because Kyrie Irving is such a ball-dominant player. He's part of these point guards, I think, like Kemba Walker, Russell Westbrook, James Harden to the Westbrook and Harden to the very extreme extent, but Walker, Kyrie, of these point guards that have these high usage rates that really just a lot of the possessions are just them dribbling around trying to make something happen. And when you're building a team, that's all right if your surrounding cast is strong, but you need that scorer. If the New York Knicks sign Kevin Durant, they're not going to need a scorer. Yes, this upcoming season will be rocky, but it'll give Dennis Smith and R.J. Barrett a season to play together, and I think that can only be good things for them. They won't need a go-to scorer. They'll have that in KD. So I think if you're the New York Knicks, the possible move here might be to go and grab Kevin Durant if you can. Spend the money, as much money as you possibly can, to get KD. If he's willing to come there, he's going to be sitting for a year. This year, you just develop the young guys. You just give R.J. Barrett a year on the floor. You give Dennis Smith Jr. a year on the floor. And I know that just kind of is terrible to say because the Knicks have been gearing up for this offseason, but I would rather see Smith Jr. and R.J. Barrett play a season together on the floor and then have a year under their belts together, R.J. Barrett a year in the league, Dennis Smith Jr. another year in the league, so that when Durant comes back, they are more ready to compete. Because once you get Durant, you're automatically a contender. You've got to be contending for a title. But I don't think, I said this in my podcast about Zion, so I definitely also think this about R.J. Barrett. I don't think any rookie really should come into the league with expectations to be competing or be a centerpiece on that team. You can come in and be kind of, a bench player or a role player and just provide some shooting or something like that off the bench. Think about some late round first picks who are 4-year guys in college who come in, provide a jump shot at the end of the bench or some solid defense. You can do that and be on a contending team. But in terms of being a centerpiece, that's not the way to build a franchise. That's not a way to build things. Because really, what player has come out and in their first year in the league has been able to do that? LeBron James is the only person I can really, truly think of to be the last guy that did that. So I think the whole idea that the Knicks should be competing next year with Barrett possibly being a centerpiece of that contender is not a smart idea. I think you're going into the New York market. I think Barrett's a guy with a good head on his shoulders. I don't think the noise will get to him. But you're a rookie heading into that New York market. It's going to be vicious. The last thing you need is the pressures of contending. Get a year under your belt. Same thing with Dennis Smith Jr., although he's not a rookie. Get another year for him. Watch him develop. These guys come out, they're so young. They need several seasons to develop. So I think that can only help the Knicks, in terms of getting Kevin Durant. Then, if they were to get KD and have him let him sit a year out, and they have this squad of players. So I don't think they should go out and sign another star because they're not going to be able to compete very well this year. You possibly can then have another high pick. And then I think that's where things get interesting. That's where you could possibly swap it. If you get a top 5 pick next year and you're going to have Kevin Durant coming back to your team, the smart idea is not to take another top 5 pick. The smart idea would be to try to swap it to get a good player in return. So I think that's the idea that the Knicks have to be in right now. And they don't have a lot of assets on their team, but they have some things that they could kind of put together in a deal, maybe to get some value in. I'm thinking DeAndre Jordan is a player who he has an expiring contract. The Knicks could possibly flip that and get an asset in that kind of trade, a younger player. Or the Knicks, if they only sign KD, they're going to have a lot of cap room. Take on expiring contracts, players like Jordan's in three teams trade, in order to get some young assets, some young pieces, or some other players, some role guys that you think could piece around your team. So I think the Knicks, with their cap room, with an expiring contract like Jordan, with some solid guys on the roster, I think there are moves to be made there. But as always, when you have teams like in New York or LA, they want you to rebuild so quick, and this Knicks roster is in some ways atrocious. You're going to need more than a one-season turnaround. You're going to need it to take some time. So I think if they were to sign KD and let it sit a year and let another year of deals to develop, you never know who can become available at the trade deadline. Think about a player like Kawhi Leonard in San Antonio. You think of San Antonio as being the model NBA franchise. And before you knew it, that relationship deteriorated, and they basically sold him, traded him for so much less than what he's worth as arguably the top player in the league. So I think if you're the Knicks, you just kind of hold out for right now. Sometimes you don't even know who could possibly be coming in the 2020 free agent class. Maybe you add a star there, things along that line. So that's the idea for the Knicks. Now, this is all predicated on if Kevin Durant signs with them, which is a big if. But if you're the New York Knicks, there's kind of one sales pitch you have to throw in here. Because as an owner, James Dolan is arguably the worst in sports. I think the Lakers ownership is probably the only thing rivaling him right now for that title. He is just a bad owner. There is not good ownership or management in that franchise, so you don't have that going for you. You don't have a great roster full of other stars on there. You're going to have Barrett and Smith Jr. That's good, yes, but that's not... There's definitely other more attractive locations for Kevin Durant to go, including staying in Golden State. So besides the money, the only other, which other people will offer him, the only other kind of sales pitch you can give KD is one that I think holds value, and I think will hold value to a player like Kevin Durant. It's that winning in New York City is bigger. And if you could be the player to deliver a championship to the New York Knicks, that will elevate you to some legendary status within league history. And while it doesn't sound that appealing, I think that attracts a lot of guys. I mean, we've heard LeBron talk about it his entire career, the fact that, yes, he does care about his legacy. You know, I think KD's kind of had quotes before that kind of hint at a similar feeling among him. Lots of players talk about it. And the New York Knicks is a franchise that hasn't won a title in years, decades. I mean, think about how much Patrick Ewing is remembered. He didn't even win a title, but just for being a great player on the New York Knicks and winning with them. So if you're Kevin Durant and you have a chance to win anywhere, you're a player who has won a couple rings, but whose reputation is kind of, I went somewhere and, people kind of view him as a ring chaser, that he couldn't beat the team, so he just joined them. That's the general perception around KD. I know it's kind of softened a little bit, since his Achilles injury, but that's the legacy of Kevin Durant as of this moment. If you're the New York Knicks, you go into that meeting room and you tell him and you pitch him this, that with this move, you change your legacy. Kind of like what LeBron did by winning the championship with Cleveland, is that that past stuff will be forgiven. Is that if he were to go to the New York Knicks and win a championship, that whole argument that he just had to join a team of superstars to win a championship, that would be nullified. And then the fact that you won an NBA Finals with the New York Knicks? Phil Jackson was playing on the last time the New York Knicks won a championship. He's retired as a coach now. Been retired for years. He was a player on that Knicks team. So, looking at how inept this Knicks franchise is, but still how important they are in the NBA, how still beloved they are in their city, I think if you're Kevin Durant, this is a chance to rewrite your legacy. This is a chance to rewrite the script, the narrative on your career. You could take a hold of it and you can say, look, yes, I did go to Golden State, and yes, I won a couple rings there, but partnering with that winning franchise taught me how to win. I took those lessons and I delivered a championship to New York City. Kevin Durant will never be looked at the same. He will be vaulted into legendary status within the league, be beloved by Knicks fans forever. And I don't know how... I can't tell you in terms of, how important that is to any given player, but I think that's the pitch if you're the New York Knicks. I think that's what you're predicated on, because in some ways that sounds pretty attractive. It's kind of like the idea of going to the Lakers and joining in that legendary history. In the Knicks, they kind of have that legendary history, but their legendary history is quote unquote losing all the time. So if you could be the person to change that, if you could be the player to flip that narrative and deliver a championship to that city, I think that would vault KD into circles among some of the most legendary basketball players of all time, and vault, I think, his personal brand into being one of the richest athletes in the world. That's how much a Knicks championship would mean. That's how important that championship would be to the city of New York. So if you're the New York Knicks, that's your best bet at landing Kevin Durant. And I think that's the move they have to go make. Give themselves a year to kind of regroup, hopefully sign KD, let him sit out a year, let him recover from that Achilles, get to 100% before the next season. Then in this year, have RJ Barrett and Dennis Smith Jr. grow together on the floor, possibly have another high pick, maybe flip that for an asset, still have cap room, do some kind of trades with some expiring contracts, taking on some cap, getting rid of Jordan, things like that, possibly get a free agent next year. And I think the Knicks then could be on a legitimate case for contending in a year or so. But the rebuild is not overnight, contrary to what every Knicks fan wants to hear. And that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe and rate this podcast on your favorite platforms, as that does a lot to help grow the show. Remember, new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For more episodes, go down into the show notes and visit the link to JacksonNeillPodcasts.com. There you'll find all of the episodes to this sports podcast, as well as the Jackson Neill Music Podcast and my interview series, Anything Goes with Jackson Neill. New episodes of the music podcast on Sundays, with Anything Goes coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you're a big fan of the show, maybe consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. For just a couple dollars a month, you can get access to bonus segments from both my sports and music podcasts, as well as bonus content from my interviews on Anything Goes. I write, record, and produce these podcasts myself as a full-time college student, so any little bit of support really does go a long way. Link to Patreon down in the show notes. If you want to stay up to date on everything I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, @JacksonNeil20. Today's music is by Analog by Nature with their song CDK Sunday. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you all next time.